Hey guys, Uncommon Ramen here. Today I wanted to take a look at a game called Virus. It is not a newer game. In fact, this game originally came out in November of 2016. It was also a Kickstarter. The game was done by Giochi or Giochi. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I think it's Italian. They were the same people who brought us Bang. I believe they were the same people. I think they had the same name. But the reason I wanted to take a look at it is because I don't really see a lot of coverage on it. When I was looking into the game, I did see Rahdo did a run through on it when it was still in Kickstarter, but we didn't get, at least I didn't see anything more than that. So we're going to take a quick look here. This is the rule book. It's a pretty big rule book. The game seems complicated, but really, honestly, it's only as complicated as you make it. It's actually a pretty simple game. But it's just a really colorful book. It gives you a bunch of tables to reference, and just kind of helps you figure out, different scenarios. Like I said, though, it's a relatively large rule book, not for the faint of heart. We have some variants here that were also included. It talks about the wall system expansion, which is something you should look into. Gives you 3D printed walls as opposed to just tokens showing blockades and whatnot. But yeah, it's the rule book. The back page is just the turn sequence, which I think is pretty cool. Why do I want to go through this game? It's actually because the game has a bunch of really interesting mechanics. How do I say this? I think they're innovative mechanics. There's something that and it's not like it has one part of it that's innovative. The entire game has just a ton of different things, different mechanics involved in it that I thought were just really incredible, and I'm going to kind of try and go through those as best I can. This is just a bag of just different tokens, mostly the walls, because you don't get the 3D walls with the base game. You have to get the expansion. These are the wooden tokens that are included that are anything from like health to luck to, stim packs to bombs. Just really cool stuff like that. Knowledge here with the book. I think it's cool that they took the time to give us this as opposed to, I guess, cardboard tokens. We have our cubes. The cubes are representations of exploration, bullets, a couple other things, because I don't know what the white and the black are. We have bosses in miniature form. They did include miniatures, which, if I remember at the beginning of the Kickstarter, they weren't going to actually include miniatures. It was something that you'd have to buy into, so it's kind of cool that they actually did include the miniatures. I guess they hit that point where they had enough to do so. And these are just the random minion miniatures. There are tons of really cool stuff in here. Next up is the cards. Really small cards that are anything from boss to wounds to clues to setup and you name it, just a bunch of different things. super cool. And then the rooms. And the rooms, this is part of the innovation here, is that you start out in a I think you start in one tile with one other tile revealed, and you have to reveal the map as you go, but you have a lot of control on how that works as you're revealing parts of the map, because not only are you going to have 8 of these cards laying face up in front of you, but your cooperating players with you are also going to have 8 of those cards laying face up in front of them, and you'll be able to, during the real-time phase, kind of ask people to kind of put down specific rooms versus other rooms, so that you can create the facility that you want to create, as opposed to the game kind of creating it for you. So it gives you a lot of control in that sense. Then we have the player board, and the player board has a lot going on here. It tells you all the costs of the different, well, as you can see, the different tokens that I had mentioned earlier, as well as the door types and breaches and blockades that you can create. It tells you the game phases, as well as, you know, how the placing creatures works. It represents deep wounds from normal wounds. It tells you about the creatures up on the top, like the dogs have +1 move, the blooders have +1 damage, the trickers have a +1 dodge, and the zombies have +1 health. And then, of course, you have your bosses. And then you have this grid right here, which I will go into, because this is one of those innovations that really makes the game truly unique. So let's just kind of go over some of the reasons why I think this game had a lot of really great innovations to it that made me think that it would have gotten a lot more, I guess, publicity than it actually did. Starting with player elimination. So this is actually a cooperative game. You can sit down at the table with, you know, with 3 of your best friends and start a game of this, where essentially what you are doing is you're in a doomed world. A virus broke out, stuff happened, and now you are an elite squad that is going into the facility where this virus first came from, and you're trying to find the antidote. So you're cooperating with your team to do so. However, it isn't easy, and you can die. And if you should die, you succumb to the infection, and you become one of the bosses on the table. And then that's where these cards come into effect. At that point, you are in control of the monsters, and you're going to be going out of your way to try and stop the players from getting to their objective. So yes, it's player elimination, but at the same time, it's not really player elimination, because the player does come back as one of the creatures. I thought that was a really cool idea. Not a lot of people are going to like that. I shouldn't say not a lot. I mean, I should say not everyone is going to like that. So it might not be something that you will enjoy for your group. And if not, I would say avoid the game. But there is a player elimination aspect with you coming back as basically as one of these creatures. So that was one of the innovations that I really thought was super cool. Then we have the wound system, which I thought was also really interesting, because you will get wounds throughout the game in the form of these cards. And as you can see, there is when you flip it over, there is basically nothing on the card unless you get one of these. This represents a deep wound and is really, really bad. Once you get the deep wound, you're going to continue to bleed throughout the rest of the game unless you manage to get to a med center or have some sort of way to heal yourself. I thought that was really cool. I have seen this mechanic in other games before, but I think it was X-Wing, actually, that had mechanics very similar to that when it came to receiving damage. It's a really cool mechanic. I like that you can have the opportunity of getting just a regular wound versus getting a grievous, horrible, deep wound. So that was one of those innovations that I thought was really kind of nifty. As opposed to rolling dice or adding that random chance, they have a deck of cards that add that random chance, and I think that is just plain cool. So then we have these cards here. These cards are each going to represent something on top, which shows like a grid of some sort. And this red dot actually represents the entrance to the facility that you're coming into. The white dots are going to show different rooms that are already revealed. So these are rooms that you already know exist. So as you can see, you're playing on a grid that is like this. And you are trying to search through all of these rooms to find your antidote. This is just your startup, and each startup is different. So when you first start, you're going to select one of these cards, and you're gonna place it the way it shows right there, and that is going to show what rooms are already there, and so on and so forth. Super cool way of setting up a game, but more importantly, it makes it so that every time you play this game, it's likely to be different from the first time from the setup standpoint. And then underneath, it has a bunch of crises that can happen throughout the game. They're events. They're a lot like I want to say they're like the crises in Dead of Winter. They're never good. There's always something horrible about to happen, and you just kind of have to roll with it and hope that you live. But I think that this setup idea is really cool. I haven't seen it used ever before, and it really does kind of randomize how this game happens. So really cool. Very cool. So the next big thing that I thought was a really nifty and innovative way of an innovative mechanic is essentially how you find the antidote. Because you come into this room, or you come into this facility, and you know where these two rooms are, but that doesn't tell you anything about where the antidote is. So how do you find out? Well, you got to collect these clues. And the way to collect clues is to connect laboratories together in a consecutive grouping. So they've got to have 3 adjacent laboratories. And when I go through the rooms, I'll show you which ones the laboratories are, but you won't collect clues until after you have connected 3 adjacent laboratories, at which point you'll start collecting these clues. And these clues are the way that you find your antidote. And when you start flipping them up, what it's going to say is your antidote is located in a room with 4 exits that has no monsters in it. So when you look at your map, you're going to look for any room with 4 exits and no monsters, and then you're going to be like, okay, well, boom, right there, that's the room. Or we'll just kind of go through this generally. You'll see cards like this where it says your antidote is going to be in a room in this part of the map, and then if you go through, you'll see something like this. Your antidote is in this part of the map. So if you've got one that shows downward and one that shows like this, then you know your antidote is somewhere up in this corner of the map. And then as you play, you'll get cards like this which say your antidote is in a room that has a wall room right next to it, both of which have 3 exits. More importantly, the room that's right next to it, that's adjacent to it, has to be a blue room or a yellow room or a red room. And it's just this is a really cool way of finding where your antidote is, or really just finding anything. I think this is a really cool way of giving clues to find out where this antidote is supposed to be. More importantly, it gives you the control to make those situations happen. Like, for instance, this one says that it has to be in a room with 4 exits that has tiles all around it. Or this one says that it has to be in a room with 4 exits, but has one of the exits has to be a breach. This one says 4 exits, but one of the exits has to be a door. This one says that you have to find 3 green rooms in this particular grouping, and the antidote is in one of those rooms. So it gives you this kind of control on how, I guess, how you find your antidote. Like, again, this one has to be in a 4 exit room where there are 7 creatures. So finding the antidote, you have just as much control over that as you do of placing rooms into the facility in the first place, which means that really it is up to you and your team to, during the real-time phase, cooperate and figure that out. And it starts with trying to get your team to place adjacent laboratories. I know I keep saying real-time phase. I'll explain that because that is one of those innovations that I was talking about. Actually, why not explain it now? So during the course of a game, you're going to have your event phase where I mentioned earlier you're going to flip one of these cards over, and then you're going to read the text, and it's going to do something bad, and it's just no fun. But that's obviously how those games are supposed to go, where you're just going to have horrible things happening during the time that you're in a horrible place. Once you finish that, you go into, I would say, what you would consider a planning phase. During this point in time, before you start the timer, you can sit there and think about what you're going to do for your turn, in terms of which rooms you're going to place into the facility, which rooms you're going to search in, which rooms you're going to activate abilities in, which rooms you're going to put blockades in, so on and so forth. But during that time, you cannot say anything to the rest of the players at the table. So you're strategizing in your head. You can talk, but you just can't talk about strategy. So if you're playing with a good group of friends, finding a way to telegraph what you're doing without actually saying it probably would be a good thing. However, during that time, you want to kind of look at what your opponents have as far as rooms, because everybody's room collection is going to be face up in front of them, and decide what you think he is going to do, and then try and play in a way that benefits the whole entire group as a whole. Because then you're going to enter what is called the real-time phase. And if you have maximum players, that means you're going to be given 60 seconds to do what you were just planning in your head. Which means that you're going to start a timer, and at that particular point, once that timer starts, you can start talking strategy, which means you can start saying, hey, I just noticed that you have this room and that room. I'm going to play this room, this room, and this room, and then I'm going to search over here. You should play this room, this room, and this room here, so that we can create this, this, and that. Or, place a blockade here so we can stop those monsters, or maybe throw some bombs down, and blah, 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 combat, and this and that. You have 60 seconds to do that before your turn is done. If you don't accomplish what you were trying to accomplish in that 60 seconds, oh well, too bad, you failed. Basically, it just moves on to the next person. That person is going to get their 60 seconds to do what they want to do. They're also going to get a chance to talk and strategize, and so on and so forth. And then once every player has finished that 60-second point in time, you go into the slow phase. So there's no more timers, because this is where you're going to move the creatures, and you're going to place new creatures. And the creatures are so the real time is one of those innovations that I was talking about, which I thought made this game so cool. So then the creature movement is yet another one of those innovations. During the time that you are exploring and searching and whatnot, you're going to be using these little orange cubes to signify the rooms that you have gone into and taken actions inside of. it seems like a great way of keeping track of actions, because you get a limited amount of these cubes to spend. So once you've run out of these cubes, you can no longer take any more actions. But there's something deeper about these little orange cubes that's even scarier, because these little red or orange cubes represent noise that you have created. When you searched the room, you created noise. When you discovered the room, you created noise. When you did this, that, and the other, creating the barrier, you created noise. So the monsters, their movement, they're going to first draw a line of sight. And if they don't see any hero, then they're going to listen for the hero. And they're going to find the hero who has made the most noise closest to them. And let's say everybody's in equal distance, or everybody's out of earshot of them. Then they're going to smell for you. And if you're within a certain distance of them, they can smell you. And if they smell you and you're the closest one, they're going to move towards you. So they have these 3 different systems where they can move towards you based on that. And it doesn't end with just hearing you. And I think that is so cool. I haven't played many games where they brought it down to even smelling for the enemy. So I think that's super cool. That was one of those innovations that I thought it blew my mind. I thought that was such a really awesome idea. So let's go to the rooms. I don't want to go through the rooms individually. I think that would take a lot of time, but I'll go. These are the starting rooms, by the way. These are how you open the door, because once you have entered the facility, you're going to get locked down. And once you're locked down, the only way to unlock it is to hit these little pads. And those were the extra 2 spaces, by the way, that were showing on the setup cards. Those pads will unlock the door for you. And you'll see there are 4 different colors here. You can see it right here. We have the green, we have the red, we have the yellow, and we have the blue. They all have very similar setups where some of them will be dead ends, some of them will be straight through rooms. We got L's in here. We'll have T intersections, and then we'll have 4-way intersections. Really quickly, this right here, this little L shape right here, represents a laboratory, and this is the type of card that you need to have in adjacent to 2 other laboratories in order to start getting clues. The interesting thing about this is the colors. And this is one of those innovations that's very unique to this. Well, I wouldn't say it's unique to this game, but it is definitely an addition to this game that makes it incredibly fun. And the colors are important, because the more of a color that you have adjacent to other rooms with that color, the better your searches are when you do the search action. So if I have 3 rooms that are green and they're all adjacent, and I search in one of those rooms, I'm going to get a better bonus than if I searched in a room that is just a one-off. And that's where I thought that was pretty cool. Not to mention the room system. Like I said earlier, you're going to have 8 rooms face up in front of you. Everyone can see them, including your opponents, but you can actually lock down those spots in your face-up room area to allow you to either fix actions that didn't work out properly, like for instance during combat you can use it to turn a miss into a hit, or to change other results in the game. And you'll notice that each card has a front and a back. When it's like this, it means that that spot is locked down. So by slowly but surely reducing the number of rooms that you have available face up in front of you, you can take other advantages throughout the game. I'm not going to go through the full list there until I've gone through a playthrough video, but it's a really neat system where you can slowly but surely kind of strategically lessen the amount of rooms that you have available to you to give yourself a better advantage somewhere else. But you have to be careful, because these rooms are your only way of getting the labs in play or expanding the facility in general. So taking the advantages too often could leave you with no open spots for rooms. You only get 8 spots unless you expand it otherwise, or if you add special rooms, which can only happen in these link rooms. When you go here, you'll get to add some rooms into a special slot, but which don't count against your total. But other than that, like if you're not careful and you run out of spots in your inventory, then you no longer can place rooms, because you won't be getting any new rooms. Now you can actually unlock the spots that you have locked out through an action. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's an action and you have to spend some resources, I believe. But on top of that, you can also choose during the slow phase to get rid of similar colored rooms that have the same amount of exits. So for instance, this 4-way and this 4-way, to get more resources. And the more rooms of the same type that you get rid of, the more resources you get. So there's all these really cool things that you can do. So really quickly, I'm going to go over the mechanics for combat and why I think that's a really interesting mechanic. Then my final thoughts. So with the mechanics for combat, and I'm probably grabbing the wrong cubes here, it's called rolling cubes, and essentially you have this grid. And I remember explaining this to you earlier, that there's this nice big grid here, and that I explained why it's here in the first place. Well, this is your combat grid. This is how you're going to decide whether you have hits or not, and that's going to be come down to action cubes and bullet cubes. Each bullet cube and action cube that you use to attack a monster is going to get rolled onto this board here, and what you're trying to do is get them into the boxes. So like for instance, this one right here is in enough of the box to be considered a hit, whereas this one is off, and this one is off, and this one is off, so I got 1 hit. Originally I had mentioned that in your rooms you can choose to flip one of them face down, therefore locking it in place and minimizing the number of rooms that you can use later on through in the game, to take one of your misses and count it as a hit. That is how combat works, as opposed to rolling dice. And I think that's a really interesting... This is all misses, by the way. I think that was a really interesting way of doing combat. And that is literally all the different things that they've added into this game that I thought were just really cool stuff. Now, let's talk about my gripes. The first of my gripes is going to be the combat system. I think that it's really cool that you roll these cubes and they end up on in this grid, and if they're full enough into the square, they're considered a hit, and if they're not, it's considered a miss. And I think that is a really, really cool idea for anything but real time. I think that the combat system takes so much time during your turn, that I would say so much more time than any other action that you can do with this game, that it just seems, I don't know, a little out of place. I wanted to experiment with this idea of pausing the timer for every time you do a combat, just simply because I don't think you should be punished for it. But really, I think that pausing the timer makes it too easy. So I think it's like a hot and cold mechanic. Like, there is no middle ground for it. You either play it real time or you play it paused. In one way, I think it's too hard, and the other way, I think it's too easy. So I am a fan of the system. I think that it makes it difficult in a real-time situation, and maybe that's just because of the type of player I am. I like to analyze. I like to go into the analysis paralysis thing, where if I'm on a timer, I don't have that option. I just got to pick up the cubes, throw them, and hope. Pick them up and throw them and hope until I kill the monster. So if you suffer from analysis paralysis, or you like to game the game, this combat system is going to frustrate the crap out of you. That being said, I still really think that it was a really good system. My other gripe is, if you look at these cards, I don't think that they have sleeves for this size. Now, I'm going to test that theory with these sleeves. These are mini American board game size. I read somewhere that these are the ones that fit. We'll see. But let's talk about the square ones. There is no square sleeves that are the correct size for Virus's square cards. These are just too small to fit in any kind of sleeve. To me, that's a gripe because I don't know... Let's see. Yeah, see, to me, this doesn't fit. This is too big. There's too much space between... I don't know. I guess I'm just being picky, but I don't think that this sleeve is the right sleeve for it. So these cards are not the size of any standard mini cards, both European and American, which is weird because it's a European game, so you'd think they would have made the cards the size of at least the mini European cards, but I was incorrect. So that's a big gripe of mine because sleeves help the longevity of the game, just like laminating things does. But then in this case, there isn't even an attempt for sleeves that are this size. So I know that they have the sleeves for Among the Stars cards, but those cards are significantly bigger than these cards. So to my knowledge, they haven't even tried to make sleeves that are this size. So those are my gripes. That is the interesting, cool mechanics for Virus. There's obviously other things that are involved in how to play the game. When I do a review of how the game plays and everything, I'll go into those in more depth. But I don't want to. I didn't want to get into those. I just wanted to explain why I thought this game should get some pretty good attention, but just hasn't recently. So those are the reasons. Go ahead and leave comments below. Maybe you have a better idea of why this game isn't considered a better game, or maybe you have something you'd like to add to this review, or maybe you have questions. I always try to answer all those questions. If you like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. The more subscribers I get, the closer I get to making an actual channel. So, yeah, everyone, that is Virus by Gyochi or Gyochi, I'm not exactly sure. Until next time, peace!